All right, we are in Photoshop, and I thought I would just show you some tricks that I've learned over the years about what to do with Photoshop. First thing you can always start off with is Command U. That brings up the saturation palette. We've looked at things that are what we call high key or very bright. They tend to be happier, they tend to be poppier. If you get too extreme like this, it's a little too much. But if you kind of stick in these higher tones like that, you usually have a good result. And this is just controlling this one value here called saturation. If I desaturate, guess what happens? So desaturating would be taking the color out, and as I take the color out, what do we end up with? We end up with a gray tone image, as you can see there. The other thing that I have to play with, by the way, it's always easy to click Option, and that will reset. Give you that. See, when I hit Option, I get the reset button. I can just go reset. That sets everything back to 0. So now let's play with hue. Hue is obviously distorting the color. This is a photograph of a dog outside. So here we got way too yellow. We've got blue. So these are kind of unnatural colors. There again might be a reason to use these, but not always. Excuse me. One of the things that's fun to do though is colorize. You can see that that's a checkbox here that I click on. And that allows me to now kind of create what we would call duotones of the photograph. And again, I can play around with this. So if we have something that's sepia tone like this is like old time photographs. So if you were doing like Nathan's hot dogs or some kind of traditional Brooklyn artisanal product design, you might see a use for sepia. You kind of have to be careful sometimes with making things too dull. Sometimes photographs being black and white kind of look a little bit funerary, I guess, if you're not too careful. But notice not only do I have the hue indicator that I've been playing with, but I also have saturation. So again, I can up the saturation on this, and now we've got a pretty bright blue dog for whatever reason that we might want to use that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and keep the blue dog. And then I wanted to show you some other fun things that we can do. I'm going to create a new layer. I think that's probably Command N as a guess, but in any case, I'm doing it here in the layer palette. And I'm going to drag that layer to be below the top layer because I'm going to make a gradient there. So right now, this is our original photo. I'm just going to turn that off because we don't need that. And then I'm going to be working on layer 1, which is under my photograph. Over here is the gradient tool. And if I click on that, you can see a gradient is already set up from blue to orange here. You have two options with gradients. They can be linear. In other words, going from left to right, horizontal, vertical, just from one direction from point A to point B. And then the other one you have is radial, which is more like a sun, right? So it's a color in the middle, like a target, and it changes colors as it goes out. So I have this set for a linear gradient. I'm going to go ahead and keep with this blue and orange one. And you can see when I drag my mouse across the image like this is going to lay down the gradient, right? Now, if I didn't get all the way to there, if I just went halfway like this, then you can see that the rest of it ends up, let's see, let's delete that. If I just do half of it like this, you can see that it fills up the rest of it with the last color, right? So I could also go in this direction, straight up and down. It gives me some control. I can kind of like stop here if I want to make a very small, sharp gradient. And I can also go left to right. All right, so there's a lovely left to right gradient going from a very bright blue to a bright orange. I'm going to go back onto my other layer, and I'm going to turn that on so that we can see it. Now, we don't see any of the gradient below because we haven't